Hello, friends, comrades, and interested others. So, I recently put out a poll on my Twitter that got about 8 votes asking what topic you guys would like to see for my next video, and you voted for this one. So, I'm going to be doing 5 tips for organizing in small towns. Disclaimer on this video that I'm not an expert organizer. I am a human person who tries to do their best in community and makes mistakes and tries to learn from those mistakes. So, seek other resources, seek other opinions, seek other voices on organizing projects. I'm just kind of throwing in my 2 cents from my personal experience organizing in small towns as well as cities. Tip number 1 is see what is going on in the community. Do not just rush in and try to start your own project. I say this because when I moved back to my hometown after 5 years in Toronto, I immediately was like, I know so many things that I want to do, and I'm going to start 2 different projects. And one of them was somewhat successful, but the other one completely failed because I did not equate myself with what was already going on in the community. I didn't involve myself in projects that were already dealing with these things. I mean, I did kind of, but I wasn't really aware of the full social situation that I was walking into. And so what I tried to do was to organize a series of workshops on different topics that I thought would be relevant to the community. And with a couple exceptions, pretty much no one showed up to these workshops that I put a lot of work into organizing. Even if it's your own hometown, like spend some time getting reacquainted with the social situation and with projects that are already going on, and try to spend some time volunteering at other projects. Like there might be an Out of the Cold food serve project. There's often a lot of work that's happening at churches and community centers. There might be anti-poverty groups or labor groups or things like that. So try to get involved with and assess the movement situation that's already there, because even if you think, that there's nothing going on, there's always something going on in any town of any size. Which brings me to tip number 2, do not assume that metropolitan organizing methods will work in small towns or that they are what is needed. So bringing it back to my thing, when I first got here, I thought the best thing that I could do would be to organize a series of workshops and try to educate people. And while I do think that there is, a lot of anti-oppression education work and education on different topics that would really benefit the community that I'm living in, I didn't factor in that transportation is a really big issue in small towns in a way that it's often not in cities that have transit systems. And so the most marginalized or impacted people in a community may not be able to travel to a physical event, even if you try to make it as accessible as possible. And so that's one example of a kind of metropolitan organizing method or thing to do that doesn't always work in small towns. I'm not saying that workshops don't work, but I'm just saying you kind of might have to get acquainted with how best to make that work in a small town, because it's not going to be organized the same as you would in a city where you can just assume that everybody can walk there or transit there and you can just like reimburse tokens. It's not the same thing for traveling to an event in a small town or a rural area. And another thing is the style of protest that happens in a small town is not the same thing as a style of protest that happens in a city. Sometimes people think that the way that people protest in cities, the way that people organize in cities is just like the model that can be kind of like picked up and transplanted to different places. And so, protests where you block the streets and march and have megaphones and chants and things like that. I'm not saying that can't happen in a small town, but I'm just saying it will have a very different vibe. It will be received very differently than it will in a city. And often we don't even really have the architecture or the structure to make that form of protest super effective, because there may not be a lot of high traffic areas. Like doing a street protest and blocking off streets in the city works because there's a lot of foot traffic and there's a lot of high buildings that have people in them, and things like that. Like you want to affect people and you want to be witnessed. That kind of thing doesn't really work in small towns if you're just kind of like walking down a sidewalk or walking through a park or something like that with a megaphone. Like that is going to be received very differently and have a very different impact on the community and on witnesses than it would in a city. Like people might it's also something that's just not normal for for small towns to experience versus in the city there's a protest every other day, and so people are like, oh, this is a protest, I'm going to get a pamphlet and see what it's about, versus in a small town where this kind of thing has never happened, it is received as very abrasive. And I'm not saying that that tactic is never appropriate or would never work, but you have to factor in the social differences, the architectural differences, the geographic differences, that there might be other forms of protest that would be more effective for accomplishing your goal. Types of protest and things like that that I participated here are more, picketing outside of somebody's office or picketing outside of a specific building that is high traffic, um, and where you're going to get a lot of like visibility for from main roads in the town or foot traffic. And also, hanging signs over the highway, because a lot of small towns rely a lot on highway traffic. So doing things that are more involved with the highway are going to receive higher visibility than doing things in certain parts of the town. Like getting that kind of public visibility is sometimes harder in small towns, and especially rural small towns. Tip number 3 is do not expect other people to identify as leftists. The social situation in small towns and rural areas is very different. There's a lot of cultural conservatism a lot of the time. And while I'm not trying to defend conservatives or anything, a lot of people sometimes identify with conservative because it's just how their family identifies, or it's more of a cultural thing that being conservative is kind of the norm, and it may not necessarily reflect a deeply held political belief, or may not be informed by like a fully fleshed out like political stance or worldview. It might just be a cultural thing that sometimes in small towns, like identifying as a leftist is seen as kind of like cringe or whatever. And so locals are like maybe less likely to want to like put themselves out there as like identifying as leftists, even if when you talk to them, they might agree with a lot of the points that you have. And so definitely don't write people off just because you can't find people who openly identify as leftists. And also, even if there are people who know themselves as leftists, they're often just not open about that, because in a small town where maintaining interpersonal relationships is really important, you like people are less inclined to adopt identities that could potentially alienate people or put like a weird target on their back or something like that. And so I've met a lot of really great leftists working in my own small town who don't necessarily like put themselves out there on social media as being like Marxists or something, but they still do have those politics, and they still do like identify with those politics, but there's a lot less visibility around it. So don't make assumptions about people, and don't kind of get frustrated if you are moving back to your hometown or organizing your small town and you're like, oh, there's no anarchists here. Like, there might be anarchists there who just don't really present themselves as anarchists, and there may be people there who currently identify as liberals or conservatives or centrists or apolitical or something like that, who would be very sympathetic to anarchist viewpoints if you just, took the chance to talk to them. Which brings me to point number 4, which is don't be the knower. Experiential knowledge is a valid and essential form of knowledge, and regardless of how much theory you are familiar with or experience that you have organizing in other communities, there are people living in this community who know more about the problems in this community and the needs of this community than you do, even if it's your hometown, even if it's a place that you consider yourself to be relatively familiar with. And so you need to let yourself be guided by other people. You need to assess, who's already doing work here, who can I connect with, and really just be receptive to learning things from people in that community. Don't go in and be like, I'm going to teach these people. You have to be receptive to learning. You have to be receptive to listening and kind of taking a back seat before you start to try to act on the community, because people will push back to that if they don't know you or trust you, or if your agenda is not in alignment with what the community views itself as needing. People will not respect that, and you will not earn their respect. And you do have to, as I read in Adrienne Marie Brown's book, who may have been quoting someone else, but you have to move at the speed of trust. So work on establishing trust first and then move forward from there. Which brings me to point number 5, which is make friends. Don't let yourself be the lonely, isolated leftist in your small town and think that there's nobody there that you can relate to and nobody there whose company that you would enjoy. Make friends with people, involve yourself in the community, go to events, volunteer at places. If there's a fall fair, if there's something going on, volunteering is a really great way to meet people and get involved. If you have any even vaguely Christian inclinations, then I would really suggest joining a church, or if you have any other religious inclinations and there are other places of worship there, joining some sort of place of worship is a really great way to make friends and meet people and get connected into community, and also just to, keep your ear to the ground about what's going on and like events that are coming up and drives and movement initiatives and things like that. And it's okay if not all of your friends are leftists. It's okay if none of your friends are leftists. It's okay if you make friends with people and they're just some guys. Like, people are people, and people are valuable and fun, and just like let yourself have some fun. Let yourself hang out with people. Go to the bar if you are a person who drinks. Make connections with people and build those relationships, because the only way that you're ever going to do any effective organizing and any effective movement work, especially in a small community, is if you have relationships of mutual respect and trust. And you can go a long way as a leftist. Like, I feel like there are people who I've had conversations with who may not have been open to hearing the kinds of things that I was saying if we didn't already have a basis of friendship, if they didn't already feel like they kind of knew and trusted me in some way. If I wasn't just some random person coming in from Toronto being like, oh yeah, by the way, we should abolish the police force or something. But if I have a relationship with someone and they trust me as a person and they know me to be like hopefully a kind and honest person, then that is going to inform the kind of conversations that we have when political issues come up. And I'm not saying to do that with any kind of agenda, like make friends with people or pretend to be friends with people so that you can convert them to your politics. I'm not trying to say that at all, but I'm just saying that friendship is important and community involvement is important. And you're not going to be able to have any productive conversations about things that actually matter to you if people don't know you and trust you and like you. And so make friends, get involved, have fun, and be kind and be patient, and yeah, have a time. Well, that's pretty much all I had to say for this video. I might make other videos in the future on organizing in small towns as more thoughts or reflections come to me, but thanks for requesting this be the video, and I hope you liked it and got something out of it. If you liked this video or you liked other videos on my channel, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, all those things. And I would like to give a shout out to Witch Paper, Amara, and Catherine for becoming patrons. If you appreciate the kind of videos that I'm making on this channel, please consider donating to my Patreon. If you have even $1 a month to spare, it really helps me both keep this channel running and live my life. And anybody who subscribes to my Patreon for any amount gets access to a private Discord, so you can talk to me and talk to other subscribers of the channel. And then there are other benefits going up from there. You can get into the end credits of my video, get copies of zines when they first come out, as well as zines that I've already had published. So check that out if you would like to support me in making these videos. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you'd like to have a conversation, the comment section is open. I'm also always open to suggestions on new video topics, so if you have something you'd like to see me talk about, just drop me a line and I'll think about it. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Peace out.